the view of the creek that most of you see, if you see the creek at all. This is walking over the bridge between the campuses, and we look down here, and there's always this question that I thought I would just address right up at the top, because I think it might be a burning question for some people when they look down there and they see that stuff and they say, what is that stuff? And what that is, it gives almost that mirror-like finish on the surface of the water when it's been when we haven't had rain for a bit. And actually that is not oil, although you might think that it is. It's actually oxides of magnesium that tend to form in that thin film, and they collect wherever there's a blockage in flow, because there's a block there right under that bridge. So that's what that is. It's naturally derived from the soils around there, and often you see lots of iron also. It looks like rust in the creek, which is what it is. So both of these are naturally derived from the soil, and so they leach into the creek and they form those films. It makes it look pretty bad, but actually it's not the worst thing for water quality. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the current conditions of the creek, and then what the plans are for the county to be involved in restoration within the next year. So the data that I'm going to be talking about for the current conditions, most of it has been gathered by the Anne Arundel County Department of Public Works, their Division of Watershed and Ecosystem Restoration Services. So they've done chemical analyses and a lot of biological work, so a lot of the indices I'm going to show you in data comes from their work. Some of it was collected by our students in Biology 210, our Environmental Assessment and Ecological Principles course. Dr. Susan Lamont and I teach that, and we have a great partnership with U.S. Fish and Wildlife people that I want to just talk to you a little bit about what we do with them. And then also there's a current study that's going on between myself and some colleagues at University of Maryland, and we are studying storm impacts on the creek, and so I'll be talking a little bit about that. So that's the current conditions, and then we'll look at the plans for restoration. So first of all, just to kind of give a perspective here, this is the Anne Arundel County here, and these are the areas that have been, well, we're showing here areas that are impaired for waterways, and I think if I get this next one on here, it's a little better. So what we can see is, so the Magathie River, here's the Magathie, and we're right here on the Broadneck Peninsula. This is the Severn River, the South River, the Western Road Rivers, all of these major watersheds, so Magathie, Severn, South, Western Road, each of these watersheds is impaired for at least 5 different pollutants. And we can see specifically what they are. All of the ones that are the yellow here, this is bacteria. So this is saying there's too much bacteria that flows from fecal sources into our waterways. The biological impairment has to do with biological communities that are present in the rivers. They are impaired. Nutrients, we have too much nitrogen and phosphorus primarily, too much sediments that flow into the river, and also sometimes toxic compounds. So all of these waterways are impaired, and of course the source of most of these impairments come from the small creeks that feed into each of these major tributaries that then leads into the bay. So we're going to be narrowing in a little bit, looking at particularly the Magathie River watershed. So here we are, a little bit more close up here. So here's Gibson Island. Here we are, right about here is Campus. And this is Dividing Creek, then right here, and this is Mill Creek. So these are the 2 creeks that travel through Campus. I'll show you a detail of those 2 watersheds in just a second. But I just want to kind of show you the overview of the Magathie River watershed. This is coded for development or land use. So we can see here that the whole south shore of the Magathie River is quite heavily developed. Notice the lack of green. Whereas on the north shore, we at least have one area here which is set aside for preservation, and Gibson Island and this area up here, a little bit more green there. But this is typical of our waterways in the county, and really for most of the east coast of this country, that we have a heavy urbanization right along the water because everybody wants to be there. And that's really the problem with our waterways, is there's too many of us, and for the little tiny streams that flow through the land here, it's just a lot of people putting a lot of material into some very small streams. So we're going to zero in now. The next picture I'm going to show you, we're going to just look at the Mill and Dividing Creek watersheds. So we'll zoom in on that. And so something that's kind of interesting, so campus is built here right at the interface of the two watersheds. This is East Campus, and here we are over here on the West Campus. This is Dividing Creek right here. This is the part we're going to be focusing on for the rest of the talk. But it shows us, so this is the entire watershed for Dividing Creek. It comes actually very close to the Severn River. Surprising. I think a lot of us might think that Route 2, maybe being a high point, might be the edge of the watershed, but actually this is the Severn River over here. So the Dividing Creek watershed comes way over here, and then Mill Creek comes way back up here. So we're going to be looking at this part of the stream right here that flows on campus. So eventually this flows under College Parkway and into the tidal portions of Dividing Creek, and then into the Magothy River, and then out to the bay. The entire watershed is 641 acres, this blue area here. And at least in 2007, it was calculated that 25% of the watershed is impervious, meaning paved or rooftop. So this is a really high percentage of impervious surface. The Center for the Study of Watersheds in Ellicott City, who looks at the effects of imperviousness on water quality, basically has found that anything over 10%, we begin to see impairments of our waterways. So a 25% impervious cover is really high, and again, basically is the cause for the problems that we have in the creek. So how would we assess the current conditions of Dividing Creek? There's a lot of different ways that we could do it. Let's say we just want to look at basic water chemistry parameters. So again, we're going to look at a lot of the data a lot of this is data that county has collected, and nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus in these forms of nitrate and phosphate. These are the nutrients that feed to algae. And later on, when we have too much algae, this is what leads later on to dead zones in the bay. And what we can see is that the range is pretty high here, and the lower edges, or the lower parts of these ranges, are the kind of concentrations that we find when we haven't had a recent rain. So they're good. Anything less than about 0.5 milligrams per liter nitrate is considered pretty good water quality, and anything less than 0.05 milligrams per liter phosphate is considered pretty good. So when we haven't had a rain, water quality is not bad. These high values, though, are what we see after we've had a recent rain. So we get this range in values depending on how recently we've had rainfall. Now, dissolved oxygen concentration is probably the single most important parameter for organisms living in the creek, and we need at least 5 milligrams per liter to support most life in the creek. And it generally is 5 and greater. So actually the oxygen levels are good most of the time in the creek. They're not a problem. The bacteria that we find in the river that are derived from fecal sources, these are the ones that cause our waterways not to be suitable for recreational use, for instance. And again, when we haven't had a recent rain, the values are low. The cutoff for the enteric oxide count is 104. Anything less than 104 is considered suitable for recreational use. So a lot of the time, when we haven't had rain, the counts are low, but they can go spike very fast after a rain event. And so these very high counts we see after a rain event. And I'm going to show you one curve that I did this fall, actually following bacterial counts in the creek during a rainstorm, actually during Sandy. So you can really see what happens with bacterial counts. So again, good to poor depending on how recently we've had rain. And then suspended sediments in the waterway, that's also a really important criteria for critters living in the stream, because those that are, most of the critters that live in the stream are going to be able to derive their oxygen from the water through their gills, and they have often very feathery gill appendages. And so suspended sediments, particularly very fine suspended sediments like the silts and clays, even smaller than sand, very fine particles, they tend to clog gills. So that if we get a concentration of suspended sediments that is high enough to clog gills, then those invertebrates that would normally be living in a stream with clean water just can't survive there. Not only that, just picture what happens when you've got sand and small particles of sediment abrading against soft-bodied organisms when you have a heavy flow after a rainstorm. It just literally washes them out of the creek. So the suspended sediment count can be quite high and really result in poor water quality after a rain. pH values for the creek are generally fine. 6.5 to 8.5 is really optimal for life, so we have no problem really with acidity or anything like that in the creek. Okay, so that's one way to look at it. We can kind of say by looking at this, well, it's pretty good when it hasn't been raining, fair after a rain event. Now, some other ways that we can assess current conditions would be to look at some indices that involve more parameters, that are more kind of long-term parameters rather than just single-shot nutrient analyses. So one of the common ways to assess water quality is what's called the physical habitat assessment, or the rapid bioassessment protocol. This was developed by the EPA to assess conditions of streams. So it takes into account 10 different parameters. So, or the epifauna, right, these are the little critters that live in the stream. So is there substrate? Is there a place for them to live? Can they attach to small pebbles? Can they attach to pieces of dead wood? And do they have cover that gives them some protection from predators? Is the channel altered by any kind of human impacts? Streams are often divided into pools and then kind of riffle areas where the water is shallow and kind of more like the whitewater kind of conditions you might picture. And the bottom of the pools would be the substrate, and if it's very fine and silty, again, that's a problem because a lot of organisms would like to live in the pools, but if the bottom is very silty, then it tends to clog their gills. So what we'd like to see on the bottom of pools is something sort of sandy and gravelly rather than soft silt. So that would be the pool substrate. The channel sinuosity, so how much meander do we have in the stream? Meander is good for a stream. It increases habitat. We get areas where we have swifter flow and less swift flow, so that we have a variety of places where organisms can live. So the amount of sinuosity is a useful measurement. Pool variability. Pool variability means basically, are these pools, are they all the same, or do we have some diversity? Some are small, some are large, some are shallow, some are deep. Again, it gives diversity of habitat. Bank stability. Is the bank of the stream going to be able to hold up when you have a big storm coming through? These are actually two different streams here in this picture. This is one that's actually would have a higher physical habitat index than Dividing Creek. This is Dividing Creek here. So it's a little bit unfair because this is later in the season when it looks greener. But still, the idea here is that these banks are more stable here rather than these banks here. So this would be a better condition. The amount of sediment that gets deposited during a rain event. Vegetative protection, again, is there cover for the organisms? Channel flow status, does the amount of flow through the stream increase rapidly after a storm, or is it more spread out in a smooth, kind of more of a gentle increase and decrease? And the riparian vegetative zone, that's the planted area on either side of the stream. Is it wide? The wider it is, the better it is, because it gives more habitat again and more sources of nutrients and leaf material and dead wood that comes into the stream, which is a good thing for the critters in the stream. They survive on a lot of the leaves that fall in as well as the dead wood that's there. So all of these characteristics, if we take them all into account and do an analysis, the highest value you could get was 200, and Dividing Creek gets 141 out of 200. So that's considered to be fair conditions, or what would be called supporting. They can support life. It's not great, but it's not terrible. So let's see, a couple of other indices we could look at. There's another one that looks at physical habitat. This one is only based on 5 parameters. So how remote is the stream? Well, that's kind of a hard one to get around here. How much shading do we get for the invertebrates? How much diversity is there in the stream in terms of things like woody debris and roots of plants? And how stable is the bank? So if we look at those 5 kind of characteristics, the highest score we could get is 100, and Dividing Creek gets a 71.8. So again, that's considered to be okay. It's partially degraded, but still supportive of life. And then what if we just look at the critters themselves that are in the stream bottom? We call that the index of biological integrity. And so biologists go out and collect the invertebrates in the stream and sort through the leaf debris and sort through the sediments to find what they can. And these are the primary types of organisms that we find in Dividing Creek. So the index looks for how abundant are the organisms, how diverse are they, and what percentage of the critters are tolerant of, say, high sediment value, which would be considered to be tolerant of poor water conditions. So when we do that kind of analysis on Dividing Creek, we come out with a 3 out of 5. Now, 2.9 is poor. So we're just above the edge of going from poor to fair, right on the cusp there, we would say. And these organisms here, these little midge larvae, which are chironomids, they're very abundant in the stream, the most abundant critters most of the time, and they're very tolerant of poor water. The cranefly larvae, when these these will become little insects, the midges that will emerge from the stream in the spring. The cranefly larvae also will become these kind of really pretty flies that will emerge in June. And then these little clams and these snails. These are all organisms that are tolerant of poor water quality because of the problem with the sediments primarily. So again, so if we take these kinds of indices into account, we can see that the stream is fair. I think that would be a fair statement. All right, so we can also look at the shape of the channel. So we call that stream geomorphology. And I wanted to just talk for a moment here about the partnership that we have with the Fish and Wildlife people, because they've done a great job of coming in and helping us with our Bio 210 class. And so this is some of the work that they do. And what you can see here, I know these are a little bit dark, but what I'm hoping you can see is this is the bank of the stream here, and this is the drop down right here. It's about almost a 2-foot almost vertical cliff of bank right here in the stream, and over here even more. This ridge is standing in the stream here, and here is the top of the bank, so it's a good 3.5, almost sometimes a 4-foot vertical side to the stream. If you go down there and take a look, you can find that in places. So our students learn to take the measurement so that they can assess the geomorphology of the stream. So I can show you here, they come out. This is Rich Starr from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. He and his colleagues come out. Every year they spend about three lab classes with us. So it's like 9 hours they spend with us each semester. They bring out their laser, and they teach students how to read the survey rods. And so the students do the surveying out in the stream. They spend about 6 hours out in the stream doing surveying, and then they come back into the lab and they learn how to map out the stream channel and look at the profile of the stream. And there's some great skills that the students are able to develop and use later on when they're looking for a position, hopefully. So based on, and the thing that's really great about us being able to do this, the county has been very supportive of actually they were the ones that worked out the agreement for Fish and Wildlife to come out and work with us, because the county wants the data that our students are collecting to show what the stream profile looks like now, and then after restoration we'll be doing it again. The idea is that we'll do it each year in our class, and we'll be able to see if indeed the stream is improved after the restoration goes into play. So that'll be a great way that we can use our data in the real world. So when we have a rain event, this is what our parking lots look like. This was a rainstorm in June. I came out and took some pictures. And of course, you know, this is all of our impervious surface here on campus. And so you can see the sediments, even in areas that you would not think might necessarily be a source of sediment. Even these small areas, you know, where people walk across these raised islands, it's bare. And as soon as you get a bare area, that fine sediment begins to flow into our parking lots. And we see it here collecting, and it goes right into those storm drains. And those storm drains, they enter, this is what they come into. This is one of the storm drains that comes into Dividing Creek. This is up on Ring Road. So right across the street from here is the admin building. So this is the size of these storm drains, these huge concrete storm drains that are feeding this little creek. And so this is really where our problem lies. So the water comes in here, it's got this concrete apron here, here's the rest of the concrete apron showing you how it comes down, and the creek is like right down here. And so the water just flows in through here in torrents after every storm event and comes down and lands in the creek. So this is the problem that we have. And we can show, here's another shot here where you can see how deeply cut the stream is just downstream from a storm drain. In the past, there's been some effort to try to shore up the banks, putting in black fabric. You can see that's not really working, and we're getting this deeply cut stream here. So this is what the restoration is aimed at, is trying to find a way to fix this problem. So I just want to talk to you about what happens on campus during a storm event, and this is the current project that I'm working on with Dr. Margaret Palmer's group at University of Maryland. She has been studying around the county the way that streams process nitrogen, and particularly streams that are being restored. And so they are working on dividing creek, and we're coming in here to do the bacterial work in unison with them. So they're sampling the water during storms to look at how nitrogen passes through the stream, and my lab is going to be measuring the bacteria that rise and fall with the stream flow. So before the storm, this was the day before Sandy, they came out. This is Mike Williams from this group. He's down at Solomons in University of Maryland. And so he sets up this kind of a sampler here, which is one of these cartridges inside this little box, so that it will turn, and it has 24 bottles on it, and they can set it so that it will collect water at whatever interval they choose. And attached to this box is a tubing. Can you see this tubing? It's a bit of Tygon tubing. It's about an inch diameter tubing coming down into the creek. So he's going to collect water from the creek. It's going to get pumped up through this tubing over here and into the sampler. And so they set it up a day before. There's going to be a storm, and usually I think they generally would have it collect maybe every half an hour during the course of the storm, so that they would have the samples that they need. Now, they can do this and then come back the next day and collect their samples. I'm going to be counting the bacteria in unison with their work, but the problem is that if you leave the bacteria to sit in bottles for 12 hours, the counts aren't going to be valid anymore. So what I have to do when we're doing this dividing creek work is I need to come and scramble down the hillside and actually collect water samples down here and take them back to the lab and run them within a few hours, so that I don't have my bacterial samples sitting around. So that's what I did during Sandy. I was able to come scrambling down this hillside and collect water samples. So this is how it was set up. So this is before the storm. And now here we are. This is October 29th, noon of the day that Sandy was here. And water levels, you can see, let me just go back here one sec. So you can remember, we've got about maybe almost a 2-foot drop right here in the bank. And now by noon of the storm, the water is almost up to the top of the bank. And at this point, we've probably had about 5 inches of rain. And so we came down here. My husband accompanied me on these so I wouldn't get blown off the side of the creek. And so I come scrambling down here and collect these water samples, take them back to the lab. And then this is just before dark that day. By this time, we've had about 6 inches of rain, and again, you can just see how high the water level is. This is a picture as I'm standing here on the bank and turn around. So this is that steep slope that's behind the Cade parking lot over here. It's actually quite a steep slope, but now we've almost got like a new river flowing, just flowing down that steep slope from the parking lot right out here down into the creek. And then the next day, here's the next day. You can see the water level is way down again, and then 2 days later, you can kind of see the aftermath of the storm now, and you can see what the amount of that much water did to the creek. It carved away the sediment on this side of the stream, so this is where the high current is. You can actually see as the water dropped, the lines that it formed. So it carves away the sediment here, brings it around here, and deposits it over on this side. So actually, this is how streams develop their meander. Right? This is sort of the way that it happens. It carves away on the high current side and deposits it on the low current side. So you can kind of see maybe this is about where the water level was during the storm up here on this bank and over here on this bank, right about like that. So I was collecting the samples during this time. I brought them back to the lab. Now, normally I have a vacuum pump set up that I pull water through a filter and then I grow the bacteria that way. But we had no power then. We had no power then. So this was a picture that my husband took when with his flash. This is really what it looked like when I was working in there. And I feel like this is the future. This is the future for us here. I'm in here working with a headlamp because we had no power. And so we had set up a system that we sent to Africa when people wanted to do water quality analysis in Africa, and they couldn't rely on power, so we had these these handheld pumps to pull the water through a filter, so we could do everything without power except incubation temperature. We want to incubate these at something close to body temperature. So Michael Norman from the Environmental Center and I talked with the staff people here in charge of building maintenance, and we figured we were going to lose power here because we always do. And we were able to get our incubator over in the canteen over in the security building. They were able to let us use one of their plugs because it turns out they had power throughout the entire storm. And so I was able to take my samples there to incubate them, so I was able to do my study even in the absence of electricity, so that was good. And so this is what we found. This was the first time I've done this kind of a curve, and I thought it was really interesting the way it came out. So what we're looking at here's our time frame here. So this is pre-storm, and then this is the 1 day into the storm, 2 days, and then on to the last sample I took was that like day 2 after the storm. So basically, and so these are my bacterial numbers over here on this axis, and this is a log plot, so these numbers are going up very fast. I started the day before the storm, so we could see pre-storm levels, and then very rapid rise in bacteria as the water level rose. So this red curve over here is the discharge in liters per second. So this was measured by the University of Maryland people. So it just tells us how much water was coming through that point as we were sampling. And this is in this is an arithmetic plot. So the peak was about 1,000 liters per second. Now a liter is basically a quart, right? So think about that, 1,000 quarts per second passing down in that little stream during the peak of the storm. Now this was, of course, to be fair, Sandy brought us 8.2 inches of rain. So this was an extreme event, certainly not our normal storm. But it's the kind of thing that we might expect to happen every couple of years anyway, if not even more frequently than that. So this is what happened with our bacterial numbers. They peaked actually, it looks like they peaked just a little bit before the water peak, but then it took them a good 48 hours to return back to what I would consider to be kind of the baseline level here. And this is typical of what we see in waterways that we sample in the summertime, which is why you may have, if you pay attention to, is the water safe to swim in around here, you'll notice that the warning that you see on the web page for the Anne Arundel County Health Department is that it's recommended that nobody swim in our waterways for 2 days after a rain. And this is exactly why that is, because it takes a good 48 hours after the peak for the bacterial levels to come back down to pre-storm levels. So we'll be doing a few more of these. We're set to do, I think, 4 more of these storm events in the next 6 months. So they probably won't be as intense as Sandy, so we'll see how it looks when there's a less severe storm. So where all these bacteria come from, you might wonder, and this would be one part of the answer. So here's Campus here, and here is the Dividing Creek sub-watershed. All of each of these little X's is a septic system. You might think that this area is served by sewer because we are, the campus is, but these are all houses on septic. And so that's one source, some failing septics with that much rain. But also think about this, each of these septic systems also represents a household. And many of these households have dogs and cats. And so a lot of this material, this fecal bacteria that wash into our streams with every storm event, is coming right off the surface, right off the curbs and off the lawns of all of our households and just washing into the stream. And this is why we get these very high counts. Okay, so what can we do about this? Well, one thing that we've done so far, we have installed some rain gardens. And you might notice this is one of the signs that's on campus right near the walking trail on Ring Road. This is one of the signs that Susan Lamont had put together with the help of one of her students. And these are some of the rain gardens that she's planted. These are ones across the street. This is Ring Road here, so this is right by the cafeteria. Planted these rain gardens, and they really do help. You can see, this was that June rainstorm that I was taking pictures. And you can see they do collect rain, and a lot of that water then will infiltrate. The way these rain gardens are designed with a deep kind of a cup-shaped area underneath them that will allow infiltration. So water will collect during a storm and it will infiltrate down and never make it to the storm drain. So that's the idea of these rain gardens. And they do a great job, but we need to do even more than that. And so that's where the restoration that the county is going to be carrying out is going to come in. So what they're going to do is they're going to take those two big concrete storm drains that lead into the stream, and they are going to basically rip them apart and convert those hillsides into a system that's called a Steppool Storm conveyance. I'll show you a picture of that in a moment. They're going to make these things called Steppool conveyance systems that are actually going to infiltrate the water and allow it to slow down. That allows the nutrients to be absorbed, the sediments to be pulled out before that water enters the creek. So those two major storm drains are going to be retrofitted, and then once that's done, the stream itself will be brought back up to the stream bed will be brought back up closer to the top of the bank, so that when we get a big storm like this, it will flow onto the floodplain, which is what it's supposed to do, right? In streams that are functioning, when you get a lot of rain coming in, the water will rise and then flow out onto the floodplain, and that's what we'd like to see happen. So hopefully after all this restoration is done, this is what will happen. So this is what a Steppool stormwater conveyance looks like. You may have seen some of these. There are quite a few now around the county. This is one over in Carriage Hills for the Severn River Watershed. So the idea is you come into an area. This was one of these deeply, deeply eroded stream beds that leads to the Severn River. And so we come in and basically recontour it, completely reshape it, and try to make it look a little bit, or actually a lot, like a natural system. Pools and riffles, and pools and riffles. So the idea is these riffles then are the shallow areas that have some cobble there to hold them in place. I'll show you another picture here, another close-up of this. So here's the cobble, and then behind that is some bog iron sandstone boulders that are going to hold this in place. So even if you get a heavy flow, it will not move. And a lot of woody material is put in to give both nutrients and substrates to the critters and also give it more stability. So here's riffle, pool, just to try to make it look like a natural system. So these are two shots from one system. Here's a recently installed one. This was put in last year over right across from the county office buildings on Riva Road. This is right off of Riva Road. Again, you can see the riffle. Here you can see the boulder. This is bog iron. This is local stone. It's our only local boulder that we have here. It's this stuff called bog iron. It's very hard. It's a sandstone. It's very hard, and they put boulders in here, and then cobble, which is rock, a few inches in diameter, and then the pool, and then so the riffles and pools are alternating. So this is what we're going to have some of these in our stream. I think it's going to be very cool. This is what these systems look like when they green up a little bit. They start looking very pretty after a while, and they look a lot like a natural system. A lot of these ones that I've shown you have all been designed by Keith Underwood, who came and gave a talk here a few years ago with one of our classes. But I believe he has just a great eye for trying to see what it is that he can do to make a system look like the natural world. And I think these really come out beautifully. So I have a lot of hope for what our systems are going to look like. So these are the places where these step pools are going to be installed. So this is Project A. So here's Dividing Creek. So here we are on this side of campus. Let's see, I guess we're right here right now, right? We're right here? Yeah. So this is one of those big storm drains, those big concrete storm drains that's going to be removed. This is a stormwater pond right here. This is what now collects water from these parking lots. So this is the whole drainage area for this particular system. It's 21 acres, more than half of it concrete. So this drains into this stormwater holding pond here, and then this flows into this storm drain here. So this is the part right here that's going to be retrofitted. And so these benefits, as I said, they will reduce the velocity of the flow of the water into the stream. They will increase infiltration. and that will also decrease nutrients and decrease sediments. And not only that, the plants that will be planted in the system also will take up more nutrients and also reduce the amount of nutrients that flow into the stream. So this is sort of the sketch, the engineer's view of what it will look like from the side. You can see riffle, pool, and then it's going to kind of go like this then. So here, this is the stream here. This is the storm drain now. They're going to kind of make it, this whole hillside will kind of be curved around like this. So these are the pools, these circles are the pools. So it's going to have this kind of a meander around the steep slope, and then it's going to allow the water to enter the creek, hopefully at a lot lower velocity and a lot less flow. They're designed to infiltrate the first inch of a storm. A lot of our storms here are up to about an inch of rain. So actually that will infiltrate a lot of the water that comes on a normal storm. That means that the water that hits our parking lots and flows into here will actually never even reach the stream. It will be completely infiltrated and go into groundwater before it reaches the stream. So anything over an inch will overflow the system and will be reaching the stream. But that's just the way they have to do it. If they try to infiltrate, say, a 2-inch storm, it would just be too much construction. It just couldn't be done. So they may have to remove several large trees. They kind of put that warning in here to let us know, because people are going to be excited. They're going to come in here and start cutting down trees. But they will be replanted as much as possible to try to make up for the part that they've taken out. So this is the storm drain that will be broken. So this is up here, here's Colt. So this is that steep slope here that will be changed. So I think that basically they're going to kind of move the outfall over to here, and it's going to come around in kind of a curve and then enter the stream like this. That's what it will look like. So all this concrete will be broken up. Part of it will be used as fill right in place. They won't even have to take it out. And it will be the step pool conveyance right here. This is what the stream looks right downstream. If you look this way, that's what this view is here. Again, you can see the steeply cut banks, and so hopefully this will be much improved after this retrofit goes in. So that's A. Here is B. B is to take the storm drain from east side of campus. So here's that other big storm drain that I showed you, and here's the creek here. So this particular drainage area is about 8 acres. Again, more than half of it impervious. So these are all our parking lots and our buildings here. And so this is that second storm drain. And so it's this one. This is the one that will be broken up. Again, the concrete will be used as part of the fill. It'll have, again, that kind of curved appearance here before it reaches the stream. Actually, this one looks like it goes up around like this and then down around like that. So it'll have even more meander to it, again, to try to slow it down and take the most advantage of the slope that we see here. And this is what the downstream part looks like right now. And hopefully that will look better once this is in place. And then once those two retrofits are put into place, we have those two storm drains out and put into step pools, then the plan is to come in and actually retrofit the stream bed itself. So here is project A, and here is project B, tie-in right here and here. So the area in between and above the first one, because this is the golf course right up here. This is really the headwaters of the stream. So they're going to come in and put more of a pool meander system in here again to try to slow down the flow during heavy rain events. So that whole drainage area is about 222 acres, 68 impervious, and that will hopefully bring the stream back into looking something more like what we'd like it to look like. So it will be this part right in here. So that's the plan, and so I guess I'd be glad to take any questions. The timeline, yes. That's always a moving target. Right now, I believe they're going to plan to do this work. I believe the plan now is to start this summer. But of course, it's always, budget sensitive. The monies supposedly have been set aside for it. They wanted us to finish our storm work by early summer, which makes me think that they want to start working sometime in the summer, but it may not be until the fall. Hopefully it'll be mostly done within 2013. I was thinking somebody was going to ask me what the cost was for this project. I didn't want to put the cost down here because it's a moving target, but it looks like the whole project will be about $1 million. Each of the stormwater retrofits are about $250,000, and then the stream restoration after the 2 retrofits is about $500,000. So it comes out to roughly $1 million, and this money is coming out of the 2012 trust fund for the Chesapeake Bay. The state is under certain mandates to reduce the amount of sediment and nutrients that flow into the bay. And so the money that's set aside to do this work comes from that pool of money and it will indeed reduce nutrients and sediment into the bay. I think there's no doubt about that. They've done a lot of the calculations based on how much water will be infiltrated to show the exact amount of decrease in nitrogen and phosphorus and sediments. And so they're sort of banking on those reductions in order to be able to justify the expense of doing this work. Yes, there are actually plans from Mill Creek. Mill Creek, the work has to be done there because Mill Creek, as you all may recall, was severely impacted by a sewer, or actually a pumping station leak right across the street from campus. And there was there was 3 million gallons of raw sewage that entered the Mill Creek subwatershed, and also it created a huge sinkhole right next to the pumping station where a lot of sand was contributed into the Mill Creek subwatershed. So in order to remediate that problem, the county was able to get special emergency permits to come in and dredge the headwaters of Mill Creek. And that's not normally done because it's not really considered a navigation area, because it's normally just kind of canoe type boats there. There aren't any big boats there. But because all this sand went into the creek, they were able to dredge out that sand so people could get their piers back. And as a result of that, the requirement is to work upstream to find out ways to prevent more sediments from filling up the newly dredged headwaters. So those projects have to be done as part of the permit. And I've been working on a study funded by the county. We're in the middle of it. This year will be the 3rd year of a 6-year study to look at the impacts of the dredging. So the retrofits are going to be upstream of Mill Creek, not on campus, but on the other side of campus. That's where the restorations will go in. Yeah, because the thing that's actually interesting, Mill Creek on campus has in a way been restored by beavers. Beavers have done a great job. They've come in and they have built a couple of really nice dams and lodges, and they have taken what would have been a rapidly flowing stream and they have caused it to flatten out by putting in the dam. So it's now a wetland. Much of Mill Creek is now a really nice functioning wetland. And in a way that has restored a great amount of Mill Creek. So it's upstream of that we're going to be doing the work. We're going to leave the beavers alone. They've done their job, and we're going to now move upstream from them and see if we can help them out a little bit. Right. Well, the plants certainly are going to have an important role here. And, I don't know that there are any particular plants that are better at this than others. I think plants in general can be pretty good at taking up a lot of what we consider toxins. A lot of that is heavy metals. Right. And the plants a lot of plants can take up heavy metals, although I'm sure some are better than others. I know cattail is particularly good at taking up metals, although we probably will not have cattail in here. The idea with these retrofits is also not only to have the plants take it up, but also to have the infiltration occur. Let me just go back. Let's see, one more here. Have the infiltration occur in here so that material never actually reaches the stream. So in those events up to a 1-inch rainfall, the idea is that this water will percolate into groundwater and will never actually reach the stream. And then when we have something over a 1-inch storm, it will overflow, and then that's the water that will carry material in. So yeah, they will certainly try to plant plants in here that can tolerate being wet and dry alternately. That's one of the key problems for living here. You know, you have to be able to take the high water, and you also have to be able to survive when there hasn't been a rain. So I think that's more of what they look for in the plant selection. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, I haven't really seen a lot of literature that says that any one plant is particularly good at taking up nutrients better than another. They all will do a good job if there's enough vegetation there, I think.
Right.
I think it's going to be exciting to see what happens in that stream.